In 2015, there was a RWBY manga made by the mangaka Shiro Miwa and produced by Viz. It's pretty cool and I want to talk about it. And I couldn't think of a better intro than this. We start with an original story that mostly establishes the characters and setting, leading to RWBY fighting Cardin. We then spend multiple chapters retelling the events of the white, black, and yellow trailers, where the manga then concludes with another original adventure where RWBY and Juniper fight a big, icky Grimm. So clearly in terms of plot, there's not much going on here. The manga honestly wastes a lot of time explaining the mechanics of this world for no real reason. Fans of the show already know about stuff like what are faunus, and so don't need to be instructed on it, but newcomers aren't given enough information on these mechanics to truly understand them. By all means, this manga is a pretty bad place to start for someone who is new to RWBY. It starts by introducing the school setting, and then, without telling the audience, effectively jumps into 6 flashback chapters. To someone who isn't familiar with the show or the series of trailers leading up to it, it would seem these events are chronological, that Weiss just goes home to do her dad's test and have a concert, that Blake simply spent the weekend with Adam, and on top of that, it keeps introducing characters who then disappear or don't really do anything. Hey, kinda like the show. Cardin, Jacques' nameless assistant, Adam, Junior, Melanie, Milsha, Torchwick, Penny, Oobleck, Port. As a fan, it's fun seeing these characters in Shiro's art style. But to a newbie to the series, it's just a bunch of one-off faces to keep track of. Dedicating the majority of the volume to rehashing the original trailers is, in my opinion, the weakest part of the manga. It confuses new readers, and it's a bunch of, yeah, I've seen this before, for returning fans, especially since, despite being illustrated well, these really aren't good replacements for the original trailers. There's a lot of stopping to talk or stopping to explain the lore. They're excellent recreations of Monty's fights, but simply due to being a different medium, don't hold as much impact as the originals. Without the music, Monty's sense of rhythm, the fluid animation, these are just cool fight scenes. And I'm not saying Shiro's done a bad job illustrating them, it's good manga action sequences. But I'm not gonna go back and reread these chapters like how I go back to rewatch the trailers, and it's a bit of a shame that the decision was made to spend so much time on these trailer chapters, because all of the original stuff that Shiro came up with is amazing. Shiro Miwa's writing for these characters is great because they actually feel accurate. In show, since Weiss is no longer a racist brat, she's become almost demure. The sassy edge she used to have is now only reserved for 1-second gags, as she's now the same bland flavor of good and nice as the rest of the heroes. But Shiro has her keep that edge. He remembered that Weiss can still be bratty, even when she's being nice to her friends. Blake isn't an angry, loud bitch, but rather keeps her quiet, standoffish nature. Yang still remembers how to have fun. RWBY does more than just make speeches. And to be fair, this manga came out around the start of Volume 3, where the girls were more similar to their original archetypes. Perhaps if Shiro decided to adapt Volumes 4 through 6, he'd write Yang to be a grouch and Blake would be slapping people. But mostly, I want to praise getting to see these characters being accurately portrayed to how they were originally written, something not all manga adaptations do well. And moreover, I think Shiro does a better job writing these characters than the show did, even back when it was originally released. In the first chapter, RWBY ends up having to fight Cardin in an arena, and Shiro remembered that RWBY had started out being socially anxious. She gets nervous at the idea of having to fight in front of a crowd, and then she starts hyper-analyzing his mace. She starts ignoring Cardin as she gets lost in the details of his weapon, and that's great! RWBY has a real character here. She's more than just the embodiment of purity. Her 2 biggest character traits, social anxiety and weapons geek, are used to flesh out the moment and to give our protagonist more dimension. Stuff like this is a far better use of RWBY's love for bullets and blades than simply having her say, "Ooh, look at the weapons!" off screen while the audience isn't even being shown any notable weapons. And it's in these small moments where Shiro's talents really shine. Blake complaining about Adam before dumping him, Weiss suggesting Blake keep her bow off while they stay in the dorm, RWBY noting how weird it is for Jean to be brave enough to go hunt Grimm, and Glinda mentioning it's probably to impress the girls. Even in the way Shiro has the kids stand and emote, the cast are oozing personality. I want to mention how much I appreciate the fact that Shiro remembers that friends actually like talking to each other. Shiro pretty clearly ships Bumblebee, White Rose too, honestly, but he still has Blake and Yang talk to the other members of the team. Yang puts her sister first and is clearly concerned when she gets hurt, while the actual show prioritizes having the soon-to-be couple hold hands in a near-death situation. And it's fun because my favorite interaction between RWBY and Blake happens in this manga. The kids are fighting a big, 8-headed snake Grimm. Blake takes takes a second to tell RWBY about a story she'd read where an 8-headed snake held a special sword inside it, which is obviously fun news to our weapons nerd. It's only 2 panels, but this interaction is doing so much. Shiro remembered that Blake and RWBY share an interest in reading. It's fun how the character with a more Asian-inspired design pulls from Asian folklore. Referencing Orochi and Grasscutter is not only a possible explanation for the fairy tale the Grimm is meant to represent, but also allows RWBY to get excited about the legendary blade. Chatting during a fight is usually more common in manga, as it can help direct the scene forward or explain hard-to-illustrate concepts, and usually that's what happens for this book. But the gang stopped to talk a lot in the canon show too, and I can't help but wish more of those interactions played out like this one, where usually the cast are busy dropping excessive lore or explaining how the characters feel in the middle of combat. Shiro lets the kids live. They have interests and personalities, and I just really love getting to see these characters be characters first and plot devices second. I am in love with Shiro Miwa's art style. Expressive faces, fluid movement, dynamic poses, excellent use of foreshortening, action is exciting, comedy is wacky, the girls look pretty and the boys look cute. Even though newcomers would be lost following the pacing of the manga, getting to look at Shiro's excellent artwork can keep one entertained throughout the confusion. Space isn't wasted with this manga. Panels go all the way to the edge of the paper, characters and speech bubbles fill up areas, keeping your eyes moving while never getting cluttered or hard to follow. Of course, it's not perfect, there are some awkward faces here and there, and despite usually using the space dynamically, there are these inexplicable, large, empty panels every now and then. The action, as mentioned earlier, is fun and looks great. Sometimes it can get easy to get lost on what exactly is going on during a fight, especially with smaller actions, but luckily the characters will usually explain through the dialogue what the audience needs to know. And while moment-to-moment blows can get a bit haphazard, Shiro has plenty of these big, beautiful shots. Long panels that span across the length of the book and full-page actions are a common occurrence. These look amazing and are usually dedicated to showing off one big attack in clear detail. While I don't go back to reread the manga like I do with the original trailers, I do love flipping through the pages to simply look at the amazing art on display. And to top it all off, Shiro went out of his way to design some unique outfits for our title team. If you've watched any of my design videos, you'll definitely have heard me talk about the Shiro Miwa designs, and this is where they come from. His RWBY design is pretty similar to her OG outfit, but with extra fun details in the corset, plus gloves. It allows him to break up the values on her body more than her all-black outfit does, and helps her arms from getting lost in her cape. Similarly, the short sleeves that Weiss gets lets her arms be easier to find during combat, and the blue leggings and black trim gives her more values to work with than the all-white design. The camo on Yang helps her body stand out from her hair, and ditching the skirt thing on her belt makes her easier to render over and over, while also keeping her legs easier to see. The only one whose design isn't an enhanced version for the grayscale manga is Blake's, as it seems her original outfit hadn't been much of an issue for Shiro to render earlier. By all accounts, these gloves he's given her seem to make her design harder to illustrate repeatedly, but maybe that's just me. However, it still looks great. In fact, they all do. In my opinion, these designs are leagues better than anything the RWBY crew have come up with since Volume 4. Shiro's excellently captured the spirit of the girls, keeping their color palettes accurate while adapting them to be more well-fitted for the grayscale medium. While their silhouettes are altered, they still read easily as the proper character. These designs fit so perfectly for the girls that I hadn't even realized they were in the unique outfits on the manga's cover. It wasn't, look at how different the girls' clothes are now. It's, hey look, it's Team RWBY. Oh, and they have new outfits! The $15 I spent on this manga is worth the price on this art alone. While I love the characterization on display and the fun new adventure we get to see the kids go on in the final chapters, this art is so jaw-dropping and inspiring. Shiro really seems to care about this product, and that comes through in his gorgeous artwork. You'll probably notice that I didn't go into many details on the specifics that happen in this manga. Hell, I don't even explain why we get a Penny cameo, and that's because if you're a fan of RWBY, I think this manga is a must-have for your collection. I want you to get to enjoy the mini-arcs Shiro came up with for this book on your own. It features some of the best writing the series has seen, and I think I've gushed enough about the visuals. All the extra lore dropping and the pages featuring a bunch of characters hint at the hopes that perhaps a full manga series could have been produced at one point, which, if that were to ever happen and Shiro was still in charge of it, I would be delighted to throw my money at it. The big save the world plot isn't ever brought up in this book, and I think that works really well for this series, at least the way Shiro presents it. Watching these characters simply go on adventures fighting one-off monsters while becoming better friends along the way is a fantastic premise. One that certainly grips me more than a group of 13 has to save the world from their demigod principal's ex-wife and her band of evil subordinates while collecting special items and protecting special women, all while stopping racism, terrorism, and spending extended amounts of screen time thinking about one dead character. But maybe that's just me. Regardless of genre and which ones I prefer, I would love to see Shiro brought on again to spearhead more of these character-driven mini-arcs. This manga is one of my favorite pieces of RWBY media, with its biggest downside being the fact that no one can agree if it's canon or not. I at least appreciate that it's not trying to retcon the original show, but rather simply enhance it. I do sorta hope that one day Shiro will get to make more, or at least come up with more designs for our girls, but even if this is all we get, I absolutely recommend grabbing this manga if you're a fan of RWBY.